Hi everyone, and welcome to this workshop series on branding. My name is Chris Converse, and today we'll be creating an animation to reveal our brand's logo. Many well-known brands use a unique animation style to introduce their brand in videos, on websites, or on loading screens in mobile apps. In this lesson, we'll be creating an animation to reveal the Altura Athletics logo. We'll start by separating the logo into the moving parts that we'll need using Illustrator. Then we're going to animate those parts inside of After Effects. Now, if you've never used After Effects before, there's a brief intro video included in this workshop, and I'll be demonstrating all of these techniques step by step. So if you'd like to follow along, download the project files, and let's get started. Now, if you want to follow along with me, you'll need to log into your Creative Cloud account, which will also enable libraries and log you into Adobe Stock. And then we'll start the workshop by preparing our logo file inside of Illustrator. Then we'll import that Illustrator file into After Effects to create the animation. And after we've completed our animation, I'll show you a range of export and rendering options that we can use inside of After Effects in order to use our animation in a range of different apps and media. And so when you're ready, you can continue on. Now, the next video, I'm going to do a brief walkthrough of the After Effects interface. So if you've never used After Effects before, I'll show you the panels that we're going to be working with and relate some of the features inside of After Effects to other Creative Cloud applications, most notably the workflows inside of Photoshop. But if you are familiar with After Effects, you can jump ahead to where we'll start preparing our logo file inside of Illustrator. If you're new to After Effects, it can be pretty intimidating when you first launch it. However, After Effects works just like other Creative Cloud applications you may already be familiar with, most notably InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop. And if you consider the fact that After Effects also supports camera raw images, it works just like Bridge and Lightroom as well. And now, if you already know Photoshop, then you already know the basics of After Effects. In Photoshop, you can apply non-destructive effects to layers, and this is one of the primary workflows inside of After Effects. In fact, the panels inside of After Effects most closely match the panels in the other design applications. So when comparing After Effects to InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop, they all have a layers panel, except inside of After Effects, it's called the timeline panel. You can create your layouts in the composition panel inside of After Effects, which is the same thing as the canvas, artboard, or page panel inside of the other applications. Links inside of After Effects show in the project panel instead of the links panel. And pre-comps, or pre-composed content, is very similar to smart objects inside of Photoshop, symbols inside of Illustrator, or when you place one InDesign file inside of another InDesign file. Now in this workshop, we're going to be using primarily the project panel, the composition panel, and the timeline panel. So let's hop over into After Effects and let me show you how to set up a workspace. So when you first launch After Effects, as I mentioned before, this could look pretty intimidating. You may see a ton of panels showing up here. But what we can do is come in here and enable a workspace called Small Screen. So come up to the window menu inside of After Effects, come over to your workspace, and come down and choose Small Screen. And now this will quiet down the interface quite a bit. We have our composition panel here in the center. This is where we're going to create all of our layouts and we can do our design work. On the left-hand side, we have our project panel. This is where we see all of the files that we've linked into our project. And down at the bottom, we have the timeline panel. This is where we'll see all of our layers once we start importing some content. Now on the right-hand side, we have a couple of different panels here that are collapsed. There's an info panel. If you want, you can come in here and close that. You can close the preview panel. You can close the effects and presets. And if you want, you can close the library panel. I'll be using this a little bit later on in the workshop. And then once you have all of your panels showing up here, you can come up to the window menu, come down to Workspace, choose Edit Workspaces, or choose Save this as a new workspace. Then whenever you come back to After Effects, you can enable one of those workspaces. Now I've saved a couple of different workspaces showing up here as well. And you can get to this little flyout menu and see all of the workspaces that ship with After Effects. But quieting down the interface like this can really help you get used to After Effects' interface and help you work in a way that most resembles the other design applications. And so once you have your workspace set up, join me in the next video where we'll jump into Illustrator and break our logo apart to prepare it for animation. Now before we start animating our logo, we need to think about what exactly we're going to be animating. So you might want to draw a sketch or come up with a little thumbnail of the type of animation that you're thinking of. So here, what I want to do is have the first letter A, which is our mark, sort of animate around and then have the little angle elements sort of shoot off to the left. Then since we have a logo where the first and last letter are the same, I want to have the letter A's sort of split apart and reveal the middle of the logo. So in looking at this, this kind of helps me figure out what pieces I need inside of Illustrator. So to begin, let's go to the project files. And inside of the project files, I just have this one Illustrator file. So let's open up Altura logo animation. Now inside of here, what I want to do is create a bunch of different layers so that when we bring this into After Effects will treat each layer as a piece of artwork. So let's come over here to the layers panel. And what I'm going to do in the layers panel is add a bunch of different layers. So let's come down here and click new layer. Let's add 6 additional layers. Then let's come down to the bottom layer and let's name this athletics. Press return. On the next line, let's name this layer simply the letter A. So double click, press A, and then hit return. Now on this layer, I want to have the last letter A out here in the logo. So I'll come up here and select this. With this selected, I can see this little blue dot indicator here letting me know that this is actually on the athletics layer. So come in here and just click and drag and move this to that layer. Let's come in here and let's create another layer for the middle letters, the L, T, U, and R. So I'll name that L, T, U, R. Come over to the canvas. Let's marquee select those 4 letters. Let's move those to that layer. And now what I want to do is take this mark and I want to break this into the 4 remaining layers at the top. So let's name the layer 4 to Mark 4. Then we'll name the next one Mark 3, then Mark 2, and then Mark 1. And now we're going to break this mark apart into different pieces. So I'll zoom up here so we can see this. So let's grab the bottom part of the mark. Let's move this to be on the Mark 4 layer. And then we'll grab the top part of the logo, this top area here. This is the logo we created earlier in the workshop series. And we'll move this up to Mark 2. So now let's turn off all of the layers except for Mark 4. We have Mark 4 selected. Now what I want to do is break this so that we have the bottom part of the A and this sort of angled piece here separated. So I'll come up here to my line tool. Click on the line tool. We'll come down here, draw a line that'll sort of snap into place here. Hit V for the move tool. Let's select both shapes and let's come over here to the Pathfinder and let's come over here to divide. I'll click divide. I'll come in here. If I open up my layers panel, we'll see that this will actually turn this into a group. So I'll hit Command Shift G to ungroup that. Press the letter A. Now I can come in here and see my 2 separate pieces. So now what I want to do is let's grab this piece here, this top piece. Let's come over here and show Mark 3 layer. And let's come in here, grab this and move that up to that layer. So now we have this bottom piece here and this piece here. And now to see the node points, let's come up here to the view menu and let's come down to outline view. So I'm going to hide Mark 4 for the moment. Let's just look at Mark 3. I'll get to my direct selection tool. Let's select everything and I can see these extra node points here. So let's come over here to our delete vertices or delete node points. And let's click on these and just get rid of these. So this tool is the pen tool with the little minus sign there. So I got a lot of extra points by using the Pathfinder tool. So I want to end up with just simply a couple of different points. I want this point out here and these 2 points here. We're going to be animating these points later inside of After Effects. So let's come back up to our preview mode. Now let's go to Mark 4. Let's come down to this piece here. So now I ended up with an extra little piece here. Let's just click on that. I can see that little line here and we'll just delete that. And we should just have this one final piece here. Command or Control Y to go into preview mode. I should just have 4 nodes. So that looks great. So now we have Mark 4 and Mark 3, which is the 2 parts of the logo. Come back up here to preview mode. Now let's hide those. Let's go to Mark 2. Now what I want to do here is break this apart, but this is actually a compound path. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the Shape Builder tool. So just like before, let's come up here and get to our line tool. Let's draw a line up here. It'll sort of snap into place and draw it way down here to the bottom right. We want to make sure that we break all of the planes here. Now I'll come in here and put a stroke on this just so you can see this. You don't have to add a stroke here, but I'll just, again, do this so we can see it. Make it a little bit larger. So this is going to be the divider line that we'll use with the Shape Builder tool to break this into the top part of the A and the bottom part of the angled shape. So before we do that, let's come over here and let's show Mark 1 layer. Let's select all of these. So we have everything in Mark 2 selected. Hold the Option key on the Mac or Alt in Windows. Click and drag this to copy all of that artwork to the Mark 1 layer. Then we'll come back here to Mark 2. hide Mark 1. Now we'll come in here, select all of this artwork. Let's go to the Shape Builder tool. And again, just like we did earlier when we created the logo, let's come in here, hold the Option key, and let's paint out the top part of the A. So we'll paint this just a little bit. The entire thing will disappear. Press V for the Move tool. Then we'll come in here and delete the line. Command or Control Y to go into outline mode. I'll press the letter A to go to my direct selection tool. We'll select all of these, and then let's come in here and delete those vertices or those node points. And what I want to end up with here is 4 different points. I got 2 down here on the lower right and 2 in the upper left. So that looks great. Command or Control Y, back to preview mode. Let's come up here. Let's show Mark 1. And we're going to do the same thing here by deleting the bottom part of that shape. So with all of these selected, let's come over here to the Shape Builder tool, hold the Option key, remove the bottom part, press V for the Move tool, delete the line, Command or Control Y, preview mode, A for direct selection. Let's select everything and just look at the points. So that looks great. Command or Control Y, let's go back to preview mode, and now we can turn all of our layers on. Let me zoom out here a little bit. So on the bottommost layer, we have athletics. So if I turn that on and off, I can see just that piece of art. Now we have just the A at the end. We have the L, T, U, and R in the center. And then we've got our 4 different layers for the mark at the beginning of the logo. And so now at this point, we have our Illustrator file set up. We can hit Command or Control S to save this, and we're ready to now bring this into After Effects to start animating it. To begin our project inside of After Effects, we're going to start with a new untitled project. So I can come up here and click New Project from the splash screen. You can also choose File, New Project. In either case, we're going to start with an untitled project. Then from the File menu, I'll choose Import, then File. And then let's locate that Illustrator file we prepared in the last video. So I'll select this here. Under Import As, I can come down here and choose Composition, then click Open. If you didn't choose that, you'll see a dialog box here, which will let you choose the option. Now, if you chose footage, it'll come in as just one piece of artwork, but we want to choose composition, so we'll get all of the individual layers. So now in the project panel, we can see the composition that was created, and we can see a folder with all of the individual layers. These are all of the layers that we broke apart. So if I come in here and double click the composition, we'll see the composition show up here in the composition area. So I'm going to come in here and change my magnification to fit up to 200%. So now if I resize this area, it'll dynamically resize the composition area. So I'll close this up to about right here. Now to check the composition settings, let's come up to Composition, come down and choose Composition Settings. I have my background color here set to black. You can set this to any color. You can see the dimensions are being picked up from the Illustrator file. And we want to make sure the frame rate is set to 30 frames per second. And let's come down to the duration and let's set the duration to at least 6 seconds. So that's going to be 0 for hours, 00 for minutes, 06 for seconds, and the last 2 numbers are the frames. So we'll have that at 00. Then we'll click OK. Our animation is going to be about 4 seconds when we're done. So now over here on the left-hand side of the timeline panel, we can see all of those individual layers. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take these top 4 layers, mark 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we're going to convert these to After Effects paths. Right now, this is artwork that's being brought in from Illustrator, but we want to turn this into vector paths in After Effects so we can animate the points. So we're going to select all 4 of these, right click, come down to Create, and choose Create Shapes from Vector Layer. So that's going to give us 4 After Effects shapes now. Now we can come in here and select mark 1, 2, 3, and 4 Illustrator files. We can just hit delete, and we're not deleting the artwork from the Illustrator file, we're just deleting the references from the After Effects file. So you can see we still have the artwork up here in that folder. So now for the LTUR, the A, and the athletics, let's come over here and check this option here, which will continually re-rasterize these. So this is basically a way inside of After Effects to tell it to treat the Illustrator files as vector artwork. So if we scale it up, it'll go back to the vectors and rescale that. So now with all of these in place, let's come up here to the Mark 1 outlines. We can see that shape showing up here. I'm going to come over here to my window menu and bring up my libraries. My libraries are where I have all of the assets that I've been creating for the Altura Athletics brand. So once that comes up, you'll see all of the brand colors. So now I'm going to come up here with this selected. I'll come up here to the fill option, click on the eyedropper. I'm going to set that top color to red. Let's come down to Click OK. Let's come down to Mark 2. Come up to color. Eyedropper, we'll set that to red as well. Click OK. And now we have these shapes set up. So I'm going to come in here and zoom up onto the canvas area. You can use the comma key, which is the greater than sign. Space bar for the move tool. I'll increase this a little bit. And if I come in here, if I click away, you can see a little bit of a gap showing up here. So I'm going to come in here to the mark outlines. Let's open this up. Let's open up the contents. Let's open up the group. And then we'll find the path. Click on the path. And then with your cursor, you can click and drag and you can select these 2 points, just like we would in Illustrator. And I'm just going to move these down a little bit. Let's do the same thing for Mark 4, which is the bottom part here. So back to the timeline panel, open up contents, group, path. Let's select the path, marquee select, and I'll just drag these up a little bit. And then I can do the same thing for the bottom corner over here. Select this path, grab both these points, and I'll just move these down just a little bit. So now what we're going to do is we're going to animate these points. So down on the timeline panel, I'm going to get my playhead to 1 second and 5 frames. Now you can use your page up and page down if you have an extended keyboard. And you're looking at this little number right here. So now we're at 1 second and 5 frames. So what I want to do at this point, let's close up the Mark 1 and Mark 4, and let's open up Mark 2 and Mark 3. Open up contents, group, and for the paths, in this particular case, I have an extra path showing up. I can come in here and delete that. Sometimes you get an extra path when we do some of those Pathfinder operations. So let's come in here and select path 2. Let's open that up and let's come in here and enable a keyframe for that option here. So I'm now enabling keyframe animations for this particular path. So that's the top red angled shape here. Let's go down to Mark 3 outlines. Do the same thing, open up the group, path 1, enable a keyframe here. So now let's go 6 frames forward. So I can hit page down until we're at 1 second and 11 frames. I've already figured out some of this. So at this point, let's come back and let's enable a new keyframe for both of those layers. Now to get rid of all of this extra information here, you can hit the letter U on your keyboard with both of these layers selected. And now we'll simply just see those 2 keyframes. So now we have keyframes enabled for the paths of those 2 shapes. Let's go back to the 1 second and 5 frames. I'm going to come down here, click on the path label here just to select the entire path. Let's come up here and marquee select the first point. And I'm just going to move this all the way back and put it over top of the first point on the bottom right. Same thing for the other top left point. We'll just bring this all the way back. So now if I hit page up and page down, I can see that we've created an animation of all of those points. So let's go back to 1 frame and 5 seconds. Let's select the paths for the top. Let's marquee select only that point. Let's bring this all the way back. And then we will do the same thing for that last point. Bring that all the way here. So now we have both of these shapes animating up. Now when this is animating, we want to have the A fully intact here. We don't want to see this gap until our animation hits that point. So let's go back to the Mark 4 outlines layer. Let's open this up. Let's select the path. Let's add an animation point here. Let's go forward. We'll add a second one. And then let's come back to the first one. The first thing that we'll want to do is come up here to the fill. And before those angled shapes go through the letter A, we want to have the bottom piece be red. So let's come in here and set that to red. And we'll create an animation on that in a moment. So let's click OK here. So now let's come in, let's select the path. Let's marquee select these 2 points. And let's just bring these up so that they match the top part of the A. So now when we come down here, hit page down or drag the timeline, we have an animation of the bottom part breaking. So now if I come in here and hit page down, there's only one spot where we need that animation to play. So right now we need this to be solid until this frame right here. So let's come back 1 frame. Let's grab that first keyframe. Let's bring this over here, match it to the timeline panel. So the A is still intact. 1 more frame. We've gotten this broken. So let's come in here and grab that second keyframe and just move this back. When you're working with animations that play really quickly, a lot of times we don't need any extra easing and we only need 1 or 2 frames for the animation. So if I hit page up, we haven't broken the plane. The next page, we have broken it. And now the last thing we need to do is create an animation for the bottom part of the A to change the color. So let's come back to our timeline panel. Let's open up the fill. Notice that so many things inside of After Effects are animatable. So let's come in here and add a stopwatch for the red. I'm going to hit page down and I'm going to go maybe 2 extra frames. And when we get out to here, let's select the eyedropper and let's select the orange color. So now we have an animation of the bottom part that's going to take just a few extra frames. So as this breaks through, we're going to see the bottom part of the A is going to turn orange to match the bottom part of this angled shape from the mark. Now we'll hit the letter U on the keyboard. That will hide everything. I'll hit the letter U again, and now we can see just the keyframes that make up this animation. So at this point, we've completed animating all of the vector points. Next, we'll put this into a pre-composition and use a mask to create our reveal effect. So at this point, we have our path animated. At 1 second and 5 frames, we start to animate this up. So let's come in here and let's set the endpoint for Mark 2 and Mark 3 outline layers. So let's come in here and just select a layer, get your cursor to the left, click and drag, and just make it so that the artwork does not appear on these layers until that first keyframe, just so we don't see any extra artwork showing up here. Now we're going to want to create our animation with a mask to sort of paint out the shape of the A. And in order to mask all of these layers, we're going to put all of these into a pre-composition. So let's come in here and select all 4 layers. I'll hit V for the move tool, select all 4 layers. Then what we're going to do is come up to the layer menu, come down and choose pre-compose. Let's come in here and name this Mark Animation. Let's make sure we move all attributes into the new composition and then click OK. Now all 4 of those layers are not going to be replaced with this one composition showing up on the timeline panel. So now let's open this up. Let's open up the properties here. And we want to create an animation here. We want to have this mark start in the center and then animate to its current position. So let's come in here and move the playhead out to 2 seconds and 3 frames. So right here, let's activate a keyframe position. Then let's come down to 2 seconds and 13 frames. Let's add another position keyframe. Then we'll come back to the first keyframe, grab the mark, and let's move this to the center of the composition. So about right here. I'm looking at the center point here. You can also turn on a proportional grid down here to see if that's in the center. Maybe I'll move this a little bit to the right to optically align it. Then I'm going to solo this layer by coming over here and clicking on the dot in this column here. When I solo this layer, all of the other layers will hide. So now what I want to do is create a mask and animate the mask. So let's bring the playhead all the way down to 29 frames. So we're going to come down to about right here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come over and add a mask. So I'm going to come up to the vector shape properties. I'm going to click on the rectangle tool. And with this selected, if a layer is selected and I have this shape selected, you'll see I get this little icon here showing me this mask icon. So what I can do is come in here and click and drag and add a mask. Now, by default, this is going to be set to add, which means anywhere that the vector intersects the artwork, we're going to see our shape. So I'll come in here and move this to about right here. Then over here in the layers panel, we can see that new mask. We can open this up. Masks have paths as well. So let's come in here and activate a mask path. So we'll turn on that keyframe here. Then we'll come up here, select the move tool, hit V. Let's marquee select the first point. I'm going to move this to about right here. Then I'm going to select the upper right corner and I'm going to move this all the way down to here. So we can't see the letter A at all. Then I'll come in here and move 4 frames. So I'll come down here. So we're at 1 second and 3 frames. Let's come over here, click on the mask so we can see it. Now I'm going to grab this point here and we're going to move this up to halfway over the letter A. So right to about there. Come down to the timeline panel. Let's come over 2 more frames. This animation is going to happen really quick. Let's select the mask path again. Then I'll select the upper right corner. Let's drag this all the way down here to reveal the rest of the A. But one thing you might notice is we are now cutting off the top part of this A. So what I'm going to do is come in here and move this top point over here like this. So now we can always test this too. Let's come down here. Let's hit page up. Now that wasn't quite enough because our in-between frame is cutting this off. So we'll go back to this keyframe here, and I'll just come in here and just increase this and maybe move this out enough so that the frame before it isn't cutting that off. So now if we arrow through this, we get this animation where we have the A sort of paints up to the top, paints back down, and then one more frame, we start to see the animation of the vector shapes moving across. Now, one thing that we'll also see is our mask isn't big enough to show the rest of that shape. So what we're going to do is come back to this frame here. We're at 1 second and 5 frames. I'm going to go one more. And when we're at this point, let's select the mask. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to move all of these points. So I'm going to move the top one over here. I'm going to move the bottom one over here. And I'm going to move the one that's currently in the bottom right all the way up to the top here. And we want to make sure that we have enough area for the animation that's inside of the comp. So we come down here, play this through, and we have enough room to show the entire animation. Whoop, not quite. So let me come back and just add a little bit more. I'll marquee select both of these and I'll just move these over a little bit. So remember, all of the points are animated on these different frames. So this plays all the way through, and now we can see everything inside of the mark. So that gives us that animated technique of swiping around and creating the letter A, and then letting the animation inside of the comp play to break the plane of the A, change the color of the bottom part of the A on the left, and then animate everything out. So at this point, we have our mark fully animated. Next, we'll add another copy of the letter A and create the reveal for all of the letters in between. With our mark animation in place, now what we're going to do is reveal the center part of the logo. And this will also be a good time to save your project. So if you haven't saved this so far, go to the File menu and simply choose Save. And on the desktop, I'll just call this Altura Animation. The file extension for After Effects is .aep, which stands for After Effects Project, and then you can hit Save. So now what we're going to do is let's create the animation for the center part, and that's going to actually be revealed by the 2 letter A's that start and end the Altura name. So let's come down to the timeline panel. Let's add the letter A layer to our solo group. Then let's get the playhead to exactly where the first keyframe for the mark is here on the position property. So that is at 2 seconds and 3 frames. Let's come down to this letter A. Now to quickly create a position keyframe, you can hold the Option key or Alt in Windows and hit the letter P. That'll create a position keyframe. So this is the final position of the letter A. So let's come over here to the timeline panel. Let's create another keyframe position, Option or Alt P. And now let's come back to the first position. Let's grab this letter A and let's drag this right on top of the current one. Now with that in place, let's come down and set the end point of that layer to the same frame. Then I'm going to hit Page Down once. And then I'll come in here and trim that back to 1 frame afterward. Now if I hit Page Up to go forward, the reason I'm doing this is I don't want to see the letter A over top of the current mark because it will complete that little shape in there. I want both letter A's on top of each other, and then when we have the first keyframe where they both move away, we can see each one. So just like this. Now another thing we can add to our composition is something called motion blurring. When you have things on the screen that are moving quickly, we should see a little bit of blurring, and that's something we can add really easy inside of After Effects. So in the timeline panel, let's come down here and enable motion blurring for the entire composition, and then we can come in here and enable motion blurring on all of these different layers. So let's come down here and turn that on. As soon as we do that, you'll now see that these are blurred a little bit. If you now arrow through the animation using Page Up or Page Down, you can actually see these are actually blurred until they get to their final frames. So now that we have these moving away, now we're going to reveal the letters in the middle. So let's get our cursor to right here. So we're at 2 seconds and 4 frames. This is where we would first begin to see the Altura letters, but this shape is really too small to work with. So let's come a few frames in, maybe to about right here. So let's come down here. Let's add this layer to our solo group. And with this selected, let's come up here and add a layer mask. Let's come up here, click and draw. We're going to reveal part of that shape. Let's open up the mask for the LTUR shape, and let's animate mask path. So to animate this, we'll go ahead and add a keyframe at this point here. We're going to add a couple of these. So let's click on mask path to select the path. Let's hit the letter V. And just like we did with the shapes, we can change the points of the mask. So what I want to do is get the 2 points on the right to match the angle of the A. And the same thing for the left points. Let's match the A in the logo mark. So let's get the shape looking like that. Now on my keyboard, I'm going to hit page up. And I'm going to come up 2 times here. Then we'll come back, select the mask path. And what I need to do is move the mask so that we can only see a little bit of the logo type in between the shapes of the A here. So I'm going to marquee select the 2 right shapes. And I'm going to move this back. And this is actually going to create an hourglass shape here. Then we'll select these 2 points and move these toward the right. So we can see just a little bit of those shapes here. Let's hit page up one more time. This would be the smallest point that we could see. Go back to the mask path. Now, since we have turned on the stopwatch, every time we make a change, we'll get a little keyframe here. So let's come in here and just make these final 2 adjustments. So I might animate this out here. But one thing you'll notice is in the bottom area, we can see the rest of the letter U here. So what we're going to do is come in here and select these points, and let's just drag these up so we can only see this where we have a separation of the top parts of the letter A. So now let's come down here. Let's hit page down. Now let's come out all the way to the last keyframe, all the way out to here. Let's select our mask path, and then we'll come in here and bring this piece out to the right and bring these out toward the left. So now if we come back and arrow through this, these should track pretty well. And then when we get to this frame here, we don't want to see any artwork. So just like before, let's get our playhead at the first keyframe for the LTUR layer, and let's set the endpoint of that as well. So the page before, the artwork doesn't exist, so we don't have the second letter A or the logo type. I'll hit page down, we have our first keyframe, and then I can keep going and see all of the type inside being revealed as we animate through. Now, one thing we'll also want to add here to make this a little bit smoother is some easing. So we're going to select the last keyframe on all 3 of these, right click, choose Keyframe Assistant, and choose Easy Ease. You can also choose F9 on the keyboard. So what easy easing does is it basically smooths out the ending of the animation. So the final keyframe, everything will sort of animate slowly into place. Now the easing can change the timing of the animation. So as we add this in here, if I come down here, you'll see that the mask won't be tracking exactly the same as we get out through here. So if I come back here, we might want to come in and just change some of the keyframes. So if I come back to this point here, for example, I'll come in here and make this adjustment. And this is a completely natural thing to do. Once you're playing with your animations, you're going to come in here and adjust some of the timing to make this all work. So hit page down. Now this is tracking pretty well. And now to get a sense of the timing, we can bring our playhead all the way back to the beginning of the timeline panel. Hit the space bar and you can watch the animation. So that's looking pretty good. I'm going to hit the letter U on the keyboard to show me all of the keyframes that are being used. And then finally, let's animate athletics. So while the letter A's are separating, let's come in here. Let's add that to the solo layer. Or we can come in here and unsolo everything and just show all the layers. A keyboard shortcut to create an endpoint for the athletics is to hold the Option key and hit the left bracket, or Alt left bracket in Windows. Let's add a scale keyframe. So Option S for scale. Let's bring the playhead out to the ending point here, which is 2 seconds and 13 frames. Option or Alt S again. And let's come back to the first frame and let's set the scale value to 0%. Now, before we do this, one thing you might want to change will be the anchor point. If I come in here and set the scale, if I scale this down, you'll see the athletics will scale based on the registration point, which is the center. Because when we brought our Illustrator file in, everything got a registration point of being the center for all of these individual layers. So before you change the scale, let's come in here. Let's select this tool up here, which is the pan behind tool. And what pan behind lets you do is change the anchor point without changing the position of the artwork. It's very cool. So I'll come in here and just select this registration point, and I'm going to move this down to be at the top of the letters. Maybe I'll just move this up a little bit. Maybe to about right here so that the athletics will come in at the baseline height of the logotype. Now we'll come back here, and if we scale this, it'll scale from that point. It won't scale from the center of the artwork. So we'll come in here, set this to 0. And then we can play this and we'll see athletics will zoom up with motion blur, and you'll see that the duration lasts the same as the rest of the animation. Now the last thing that we'll do is come down here and add an easy ease to this as well. So right click, keyframe assistant, easy ease, or you can hit F9. So now if I arrow through this, everything will end at exactly the same point. And so now we've completed our animation. Next, we're going to talk about a couple of different rendering options where we can use our animation in mobile applications. We can use them in XD and Dreamweaver using Lottie files, which is a web-based animation tool. And of course, we can use this in video projects as well. And we'll talk about all of the rendering options next. So now that we've completed our animation, now it's time to render or export our animation out to a couple of different formats so that we can use these in different media types. Now, After Effects can export to a ton of different formats, but these are the ones that are going to be the most popular, the ones that are probably going to be the most requested from you. Now, MPEG-4 is by far the most popular video format used in social media. Streaming sites use this to stream down TV shows and movies. You can use these directly on your web pages using the HTML5 video element. They're inside of mobile apps, and of course you can send these through text messages. Now the animated GIF format, while not a video format, does support animation and is widely used in social media and text messaging, and is one of the only formats you can use reliably in email. And then next we have Lottie files. In relation to the rest of these file formats, this format is relatively new. And what this does is it basically takes the animation and encodes this into a text file and then allows this to be played back with JavaScript. Now you can play these on websites and mobile applications, which was the original idea behind this particular format. And you can also use these in interactive experiences. And I'll show you how to bring one of these into an XD file. Next we have PNG files. PNG files are graphic files like JPEG, but they support transparency. So a lot of times 3D software and some CSS-based animations can play a sequence of PNG files so we can get some video type effects without any of the compression with video. Next is a QuickTime movie file. One of the advantages of this particular format is that this can support transparency, so it's great for use in other video and animation software, as well as compositing. And finally, we have a motion graphic template. This is a format that you'll find on Adobe stock in addition to a bunch of other different places. And what this basically does is capture all of the motion graphics into a single file that you can reuse inside of Premiere Pro while changing some of the individual settings each time you use it. And so in the next video, I'll walk you through the workflows for exporting these different formats from both After Effects and the Adobe Media Encoder. Back in our After Effects file, let me show you how we can export and render some of those formats we were talking about, both inside of After Effects and the Adobe Media Encoder. Now, if you want to export to the MPEG-4 format, you're going to need to use the Adobe Media Encoder. So you want to make sure that you have your composition timeline selected or the composition panel, then go up to the file menu, come down and choose export and choose add to Adobe Media Encoder queue. When you choose this, what After Effects is going to do is open up the Adobe Media Encoder, and it's going to load this composition into the queue here inside of the Media Encoder. Now, once we're inside of this queue, we can choose from a bunch of different formats. So in here on the first panel, we can come in here and choose a particular format. So if I wanted a PNG sequence, for example, I would choose PNG sequence here. And then on the next panel, I could click on this link and set some of the properties. So I might choose PNG sequence with alpha here, for example, which means every one of those PNG files would be transparent. Let's click cancel. Now for an MPEG-4, this uses the H.264 codec. So we can select that here. Then in the preset panel, we can come over here and choose a preset. Now, if you're not sure what you want to do over here, if you're not going directly to Vimeo or YouTube, for example, you can never go wrong by coming down here and selecting one of the high quality options. So you can choose from any one of these, something that closely matches the size of your particular video. And then you can come over here, click the output file and choose where you'd like to save that. So that's how you can do MPEG-4 and ping sequences. You can also do animated GIF in here as well. So come down and choose animated GIF, export this out. You can use that in your social channels. And as I mentioned before, this is the format that you'll want to use if you want to put animation into an email. So with that, I'm going to come over here and close the media encoder. I'm not going to render this out. Then back inside of After Effects, if you want to render a couple of formats directly from After Effects, we can come up here to the export menu. And instead of choosing the media encoder, just choose Add to Render Queue. That's going to open up another panel inside of After Effects. Down here, we have a bunch of different options. So if I come in here and click on the output module, click on lossless, you can come in here and you can change the formats. So if I wanted to create a transparent QuickTime movie, I could come up here and choose QuickTime from this menu here. Then from the channels, just choose RGB plus alpha. You would also be able to create a ping sequence doing the same thing. Ping sequence, RGB plus alpha. So there's a couple of different ways you can export some of the different formats. I'll cancel this here, and then back in the render queue, you can click on this link here and choose where you'd like to save your files. Once you're ready, you can come over here and click on the render option. There's also a direct link in the latest version of After Effects that can go right to the media encoder queue as well. Now the next format I want to show you how to export is a Lottie file. So if you come up to your Creative Cloud app, then inside of here, come over to the Stock and Marketplace. If you come down to All Plugins, you can come in here and search for Lottie files. I've already installed this, so I'll go to my Manage Plugins tab, and I can see Lottie files for After Effects here. So this is a free plugin, and this allows you to export files directly from After Effects to the Lottie format, which is technically a JSON file. So if we go back over to After Effects, I'm going to come up to my window menu, come down and choose Extensions. I'll come down and choose Lottie files. That'll open in this panel over here. And what Lottie files will do is show me every composition that it can export to a Lottie file. So if I come over here and click on this right arrow, this will load the comp we've been working on, and I can see a little preview here. Then I simply come up here, click Save As, and then choose either the Lottie format or the JSON format. So I'll choose the JSON format, and then I can pick where I'd like to save that. So I'll cancel this and close these. I've already exported some of these formats. And then the last example I want to show you is how to export a motion graphic template. So I'm going to come up to the window menu inside of After Effects, come down and choose the Essential Graphics panel. And the Essential Graphics panel allows me to take any comp I'm working with inside of After Effects and save it out as a template that I can use in Premiere Pro. So first I'll come up here to the top and I can name this. So I'll name this Altura Athletics. The primary composition is going to be the Altura logo animation, which is this comp right here. Now, in order to use this, I do need to define one property that somebody could actually come in here and change. So let's go back to the composition down here in the timeline panel. Let's come down to the athletics option here. And what I want to do is pick one of the properties here. So I'm going to open this up, come down to my layer styles, and I've applied a color overlay so I can change the color of athletics. And I'll just grab this property and drag this in here. So this is going to be the athletics color. So I'll put that in here, press return, and then I can come down here and click Export Motion Graphic Template. So now that we've talked about how to export multiple different file formats from After Effects, in the next video, I'll show you how we can actually implement some of these different formats and how they work differently across different media types. In the last video, we covered a bunch of different formats that we can export from both After Effects and the media encoder. So in this video, I just want to show you some practical examples of how we can use some of those formats. So if I come over here and reveal my desktop, I've exported a couple of different formats. So the MPEG-4 format, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the most popular video formats out there. And you can also import these in a wide range of Creative Cloud applications, including InDesign. If you want to put your video into a digital magazine, for example, you can bring these into Premiere Rush. You can even bring MPEG-4 files into Photoshop and create animated social media graphics there. So there's a wide range of things that you can do with an MPEG-4. We also have the ping sequence. What a ping sequence does is basically creates a single ping graphic from every one of the frames of your animation. So if I come in here and preview one of these and just arrow through the different frames, you can see that every one of the individual graphics is actually one of the frames from the animation. And this supports full transparency as well. So this is a great format for compositing your animation with other design tools. And another format that allows you to add transparency is the QuickTime format. So I also exported a QuickTime format with RGBA plus alpha, which gives us a video file with transparency. And this is the first example that I want to demonstrate here. So if I switch over to a project that I'm working on inside of After Effects, grab my video and just drag it right into the project panel, I can then take this file and drop it right on top of my video. And you'll see all of the transparency supported. You'll also notice if I come down here and move the track around and drag the timeline panel, we can see the animation playing over top of the video. So I can pick exactly where I want the logo to start. And if you remember back from one of the earlier workshops, we actually created this letter A to sort of look like the legs of a runner. So I can decide when this animates on, and then I can have this hold on the screen while the camera zooms back. So again, this gives me a great way to composite my animation with full transparency over top of any other artwork or video. Now the other example I want to talk about is a motion graphic template. So in the last video, I exported a motion graphic template from the Essential Graphics panel inside of After Effects, and I want to show you what that looks like inside of Premiere Pro. So here I have another project that I'm working on. I've got the same video here on the timeline, but this crossfades into this woman who's working out. And what I want to do is install my motion graphic template so I can put the logo on this. So what I'm going to do is come up to the graphics menu, come down and choose Install Motion Graphic Template. I'll locate the .mogrt or mogrt file from my desktop, click import, and now we'll see this showing up right here. Now I can grab this file and drag and drop it onto my timeline. So now when I play this, we can see that animated logo is playing here as well. Now in order to change this, I'm going to bring up my effect controls, make sure that I select this motion graphic track down here at the bottom. I'll open this up a little bit. I'll open up the motion effects here. Come over here to scale and position. Let's come in here, I'll just scale this down and maybe move this down here. Now, if you remember, we also added a customizable property here. So if you come over here and look at the Essential Graphics panel, when I have this selected, I can come in here and change the color as well. So if I were to come in here and click on this, I could change the word athletics to any color. So red, for example, I could click OK. Or I can choose one of my brand colors. And so once I have that positioned and scaled, I can bring the timeline panel back and hit play and preview this animation playing over top of my video. And now the final format I want to show you is how to use the Lottie files. Now there's two basic ways that you're going to use a Lottie file. One is you're going to put them on your web page or inside of a mobile application. And in both cases, those are going to use something called a Lottie player. So inside of Dreamweaver here, I have the web page that we worked on earlier in the workshop. And we're basically loading in the lottieplayer.js file. This is a free JavaScript file that basically takes that JSON file and converts it back into an animation that can play inside of a browser or inside of an app. So in this case, I'm loading this inside of an HTML page. So then down here, we can see the Lottie player element with a couple of different properties. Under the source, we can see that I'm simply linking to the .json file. Now to preview this, I can come down here, click on Preview in Safari, and we can see the earlier web page. And so now inside of that web page, instead of having the Altura Athletics in an H1 tag using that typekit font, I have the Lottie file animation showing up here instead. And then finally, if you want to use Lottie files inside of XD for a prototype, you can simply grab the JSON file, drop it right inside of XD. XD knows exactly what to do with it. If you look in the layers panel, we can see the Altura logo animation showing up here with a little play icon. So I'll come over here to my inspector panel. I'm going to set this to about 400 pixels, press return, and then I'll just position this down here, about right there. Use my arrow keys and just put it exactly where I want it. Then over here in the interaction panel, I can choose what happens on this Lottie file when I preview this. So I want this to play automatically. So with that in place, I can come up here and click play, preview my prototype, and I now have my Lottie file playing inside of XD as well. So this brings us to the end of the workshop. We've used a few different animation techniques inside of After Effects to bring our logo to life, including animating vector shapes and masks, using motion blur, creating pre-comps, and exporting to a range of different file types. So now that we have a motion style created for our brand, in the next workshop, we'll start making some noise for our brand with Adobe Audition.